So hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today titled Creating Effective Minutes for Your Board Meetings. My name's Sean McDonald and I'll be your moderator for the next 45 odd minutes. Now, firstly, thanks for coming today, attending today. We really appreciate the effort you've made to be here. And during our session, if you have any questions, which I'm sure you will do, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat button. We'll be answering these during our sessions and try to get through as many of these as we have time for. And finally, if you stay through till the end, which we hope you will do, and is customary for our webinars, we have a special treat for you by answering a 1-minute survey at the end. And it is a 1-minute survey. It's nice and short. You'll go into the draw to win our beautiful gift hamper worth over $400. Now, let me just see if I can get my slides working. Can you see that on screen, Jen?
Not yet, Sean.
All righty, here we go.
Aha, that's better. There we are.
Fabulous. So for those that know little about Board Pro, we are a board software provider that serves just over 20,000 users around the world. We enable organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings more efficiently and effectively with clever software, namely ours, with less time and deliver more impact and value for the organization. And as much as we are a software provider, part of our wider mission is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organizations, especially those with resource constraints. Now, on our website, under the resources section, you will find a wealth of information. There's templates, guides, white papers, anything you need in and around the governance area to make your business life a little easier. For today, let me introduce our fantastic panel for the webinar. Jen Butler of Absolute Gems is a professional board secretary in both the public and private sectors, working across a variety of industries, business types, and organizations of all sizes. Jen brings a fresh and collaborative approach to governance, organization, planning, and administration. Kia ora to you, Jen.
Kia ora koutou.
Danica Peklowski is an experienced and award-winning company secretary with experience in legal, health, and financial services. Danica is a chartered member of the Institute of Directors and sits on the board of Takapuna School and is the founder and director of a board administration services. I always find that a mouthful, so I'm going to say it again. Board Administration Services. Kia ora to you, Danica.
Kia ora, Sean, and hello, everyone.
So for the next 45 minutes, just relax and listen and add to the discussion by asking as many questions as you have time for. The full recording of this webinar will be sent alongside the slide deck, the white paper, and the all-important minute-taking template. These will be sent out about 24 hours after the session today. So without further ado, let me move us on and hand it over to Jen.
Kia ora, Sean. Lovely to see everybody online. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to run through this as quickly as I can because every time we've run this webinar, we've had so many questions and it's really valuable for you guys to get the most out of it. Now, the question of why your minutes are so important, firstly, it's in terms of compliance, right? So, Sean, can we move to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So, it is actually a legal requirement for any incorporated society, any incorporated company to have minutes. But even if you're not an incorporated society or a charitable organisation or a limited liability company, keeping records of your minutes are actually really important so that you can go back through over years to see where the history of your company and how it's progressed. So here in New Zealand, you're required to keep your minutes for at least 7 years. I'm pretty sure it's the same in Australia. It's definitely the same in the UK and Canada. It's a little bit different depending on what state you're in the US. Danica, do you work with any other countries?
I don't know, but in all of the companies that I've worked for, generally you don't actually dispose of the minutes anyway, because they tell the story of your company. So they're the record of every decision that you've made and kind of conversation that you've had and action that you've taken over the lifetime of the company. So there's certainly those legal requirements, but there's more value in keeping them long term as well.
Absolutely. Next slide, Sean.
Rolling on.
So the other reason other than compliance is, again, to demonstrate the integrity and thoroughness of the process. I mean, remembering that your minutes are being kept for a minimum of 7 years. And as Danica rightly says, generally we don't discard the minute book. We're keeping them for longevity. I've got an organisation that's been going for 70 years and I still have the minute books, the paper minute books with the absolutely glorious handwriting in them from many years to come.
You get the leather-bound ones with the sticky pages that they get put inside. They're wonderful.
I know, it's crazy, right? Now we just use Board Pro or whatever governance tool you're using, and it's an absolutely secure place for you to keep your minutes and for everybody to be able to have access to them. So trying to remember what the context of your minutes were in 7 years or 20 years or 50 years is pretty difficult. It's a really good place to keep all of the information and due diligence for your incoming directors. They need to be able to see the deliberations and the considerations and decision making. And it's a bit like showing your workings in a maths exam. The judge, who is ultimately responsible if you end up in a tricky situation, she's not looking for the right answers. They're looking to ensure that the right process has been made in your decision making. So it's important with the legal compliance as well to note that your minutes should be written like a letter to the judge. There we go. Fantastic. So now we're on to some of the tricky stuff. And I know that you'll all have questions around this about recording conflicts of interest. It's a really difficult task to do in minute taking. Every set of minutes, particularly for a limited liability company, and now with an incorporated society with the changes to that act, you do actually have to have an interests register, and you do need to record those. So how does that work? There are many different ways of looking at it. There's always the Institute of Directors guidance, which says if there is a real, perceived, or potential conflict of interest, that needs to be recorded. Generally, I sort of say to my directors, just put everything in there and then you're covered. Better to disclose and have everything there than, to come up with something 10 years into the future. Are you the same on your boards, Danica?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should just write down every board, company, school, anything that you're involved in from a governance term or employment. And I've seen in some instances people actually disclose the interests that are relevant of their immediate family as well. So if they've got a spouse or a son or daughter that works for a company that's a supplier, potentially they might actually disclose that.
Certainly in public, that's actually required that, if you have those close familial ties, that those interests are disclosed as well. So in terms of how we manage that in a board meeting and in the minutes, even though you've got an interest register and those interests are disclosed, you really need to, if there is an item of conflict, you really need to record that at the beginning of the item. And as a professional board secretary, I take it on as my job to make sure that the chair and the board are aware that there is a potential conflict of interest at the time of discussion. So either at the very beginning of the meeting when the chair is doing their welcome and address, mention it there, and then again when we get to that particular topic that may cause any conflict. The way that the board deals with conflict is individual and unique to every board. Here in New Zealand, you can't actually ask the board member to leave the room. A conflicted director is allowed to participate in the conversation, vote on the decision, and have that full process. They can choose to leave the room if they want to, if they feel that that better protects the board and themselves from their conflict, but you can't ask them to. It's a little bit different in the UK. In the UK, there's no requirement for conflicts to be managed through legislation. It's it's literally up to the board to make those decisions.
And I think, Jen, just important to note from a minutes perspective is you need to record that. So if someone states during a conversation, I just want to note that I'm privy to XYZ, that should go in the minutes. And if someone leaves the room, you should state in the minutes that XYZ left the room and then XYZ came back to the room and at what time.
Yeah, absolutely, Danica. Good point. So, responsibility. Now, Board Pro manages actions exceptionally well. And for us board secretaries, it's just awesome because I don't have to chase anybody for their actions. They get an automatic a reminder 7 days out or 10 days out. You can choose how long you want for their actions to take place. So it's really simple and easy to do it like that. I guess I can't remember back in the days.
If you don't have board software, you still need to record those down in the minutes, the actions, and it's important to note what the action is in a substantive way so that whoever that's going to understands exactly what it is that the board's asking of them. It needs to have who's responsible for the action, who it's been assigned to, and it should have a due date. So you should understand when the board is expecting the outcome or an update of that action to come back. And it's really helpful if you don't have board software to put that into a table so that you can track that and you can see what's open, what's closed, and include a column for kind of status updates in terms of what's happening with the action if it's not open or closed.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, the beauty of Board Pro is it automates that for you.
100%. And I guess the problem for board secretaries or the person taking the minutes is quite often there's a real flow to the meeting, and it's really difficult when someone says, oh, you can do that, but they don't clarify, when that action's going to be due or, the exact nature of that. So my advice to the board secretaries out there is don't be afraid to speak up and say, just a moment, do you think you'll have that done by the next board meeting, or is it going to be pushed out to November or December? Just so you can clarify that. And if you don't manage to catch it up, definitely have a conversation with the chair before the meeting ends on that.
I have a few questions here, ladies. This one from Carolyn. Do I legally have to keep hard copies of all board papers, minutes, and board packs, or is Board Pro enough? I have hard copies back to 2003 in our archives, but is Board Pro enough?
Blessed. Board Pro is absolutely enough. The new signatures tool is going to be dropped very soon on Board Pro. Yeah, I know, it's really exciting. And so you can actually have those minutes signed, but electronic confirmation is actually legally binding as well. So we don't need to worry too much about that. But I guess if your organisation's audited, it can be really useful to have a hard copy of your minutes to be able to provide to auditors. We're looking at some specific access for and potentially creating an audit pack in Board Pro as well. So those are exciting things to potentially look forward to.
I think the short answer is no, you don't need to have hard copies. You can have digital copies of your board papers and minutes. You can have both. You can print the digital copies and have hard copies as well in parallel, or you can scan those archived hard copies and have everything digitally. There's no requirement for either. Both are fine. I
will just tell you that Board Pro's a secure system. And one of the reasons that we use Board Pro is to make sure that our confidential and private information that's often discussed in board meetings isn't accidentally left on public transport, left in a cab, or put in an insecure rubbish bin and information accidentally leaked. So by not printing the board pack, by encouraging your directors to use a governance tool or product online, actually keeps that information much more secure.
Right. And saves trees.
And trees.
Trees, definitely.
Righto, moving right along.
Hang on just a minute. We have a couple more. Scott Fisher has asked, he's actually asked for some confirmation. Can you repeat that? The conflicted director can participate and vote in the discussion? Question.
Correct. It is a really difficult one. So Companies Act in New Zealand states that a conflicted director has the right to participate in any conversation and vote for any matter that they are conflicted, as long as that conflict has been noted. Now, if that doesn't sit right for you and your board discusses and agrees that that's not the process, then you can actually contract out of the Companies Act by way of constitution. So if your company constitution says that the way that your company will deal with conflicts of interest is that a conflicted board member will be asked to leave the room, then you can absolutely do that. But you actually have to have that in your constitution or be held to the Companies Act.
Is it the same in Australia, Jen?
I'm not entirely sure about Australia. I know in the UK there is no requirement for the director to participate, so it is all down to the constitution in the UK. I haven't got the experience for my companies in the States or Canada, but perhaps we can have a wee fish around and find that out.
Yeah, I think your first point of reference should always be your company constitution. Often that'll state in there how to manage voting or conflicts of interest. And then if it's not in the constitution, you revert to the law in your local area.
Okay, let's move on. We have a ton of questions. Now, at this point, we should let you know that with all the questions we've got coming in, we're probably not going to have enough time to get through them all in this session. So what we're hosting tomorrow is a special live stream event on LinkedIn where Jen and Danica will be answering all these questions from you today. So more on that a little bit later on. So moving right along.
There we go. So the decisions recorded in minutes can actually help with strategy and planning. Did we apply our values as to the decisions that we made last year? Did we make decisions that promoted the strategy that we agreed to? Are the topics we discussed at our meetings helping us progress our strategy? And was there anything missing? So that's a really good way to use your minutes. That is often a sort of a think outside the box way to deal with those. Thank you. Now, it's an important function when a company's adding a new director that they be professional, that they have a good induction, and part of that induction means being able to review the board minutes. So I guess another lens that we're looking at from this is when new directors come on board, making sure that the minutes actually reflect the culture and values of the company. And not only that, but give that new director a flavour of what they can expect at board meetings, whether there's a consistency in your agendas and the way that topics are discussed, the way that the meeting's chaired. It's important to capture that in the minutes. Danica?
Yeah, and I think it's also very important, you've kind of got the due diligence there, not just in director induction, but in any kind of merger or acquisition or divestment, the minutes are one of the first things that are called on by potential buyers to look at the way that the company has handled their compliance, has handled decisions that they've made. So you need to have them all filed accurately, be in good order, have those signed copies or, those electronic approvals all nice and put in a tidy box so that when that process comes, everything can be passed on in a really timely manner.
Absolutely.
And of course, it's what the auditors ask for every year is the board packs and the minutes.
Yeah. So as I said before, we are working on creating some access for auditors that will keep your information secure, but give them what they need, and perhaps even being able to download a full board pack, so no more having to print out, minute and board pack by stages. It'd be so much more faster and efficient. So to document organisational evolution, we've already touched on that a little bit. So, being able to look back at your company's history, be able to record, and I really encourage people who are taking minutes to celebrate, to record those celebrations, when the company's had a record profit or they've expanded or grown, certainly it also speaks to the company's culture to celebrate those wins. So keep them in there.
I just want to touch on that one, Jen. I think it's important as well that minutes are objective, that you're not putting of bias or personal opinion. So as a minute taker, you're reflecting the conversations that are had. And if the board or management bring up those wins, then absolutely you should record it, but you shouldn't be putting your own interpretation of what they're discussing into the minutes. So you might be impressed by the fact that you've had a record profit, but unless it's actually stated and discussed at a board level, it's not your job to be putting that into the minutes yourself.
Oh, of course, absolutely, as always. Yes, definitely.
Couple of questions, ladies, from Kristen Kyle. Is there, if there is no legal requirement to move and second resolutions, what do we note in the minutes?
The approval.
Yeah, that the board approved the decision.
I'm moving all my boards away from moving and seconding. It's a real archaic process. There's no legal bound for it. So, you know, and I think it also helps with that inclusive culture as well, that no one's more important than anyone else on the board.
I have two questions here that I'll answer, actually. Nikki and Anonymous has asked, is Board Pro able to assign the action to more than one person? At the moment, they're not. You're not able to, but we are working on that action as we speak, and we should be releasing that I believe in the next quarter, along with signatures.
Actually, sorry, just to backtrack a little bit there, on that approvals question with the movers and seconders, if you're using Board Pro, it does ask you for a mover and a seconder when you're putting in a decision. So if you don't have movers and seconders, what I'd suggest is you put it into the notes that it was resolved at the board approved XYZ. You don't necessarily have to use a decision tool. The only downside of that is it then doesn't automatically populate the decisions register.
Oh, Danica, the decisions tool doesn't require you. It's not a mandatory field to put in a mover or seconder. If you leave that blank, it actually just leaves those. It actually just creates the decision without mover and seconder, and you just literally say that the decision was approved, and it pulls it all through.
Well, thanks, Jen. That's good clarification.
Yeah, it's so easy.
Errol has asked, when a conversation has taken place with multiple board members contributing to the discussion, what's the best way to summarize or capture, record that conversation for the minutes?
Yeah, it's really difficult, particularly when people are talking over each other or if the conversation gets heated. The way I deal with that is I say to the chair, how would you like me to summarize that?
I think it's best to treat the board as its own entity. So the board is a team, and directors shouldn't be acting in their own interests at a board meeting. It's collective decision making. So it's better to state that the board discussed XYZ and to summarize the conversation as opposed to a more verbatim transcript of who said what. Absolutely,
Danica. I highly discourage I highly discourage putting in board members' names unless it's necessary. So, for example, if a board member said, I'd like to have it noted that I, whatever it happens to be, disagree with that, that this concerns me in particular, then I will certainly note that person's name. But in every conversation, it's always the board discussed, the board agreed, the board considered, the board directed. So, because as you say, they are one entity, one natural person according to the Companies Act, and that's everywhere in the world. So if we move through to actually taking the minutes, slide through. Who should take the minutes? So I'm just going to start by prefacing this, that if you think that a board secretary should sit in the corner, dutifully saying nothing, taking your minutes, and then bring in the cups of tea at 10 o'clock, you are missing out on huge value to your board. A company secretary or board secretary, and those two are two separate things. Danica, I'll get you to have a wee chat about the difference between a board secretary and a company secretary now, because there is a few differences. But a board secretary can add so much value as a minute taker. common practice is for one director to take minutes if you don't have a professional board secretary. What that means is that director can't fully participate in the meeting. It means that they have to try and note down all the things that were happening and take those very professional minutes, but it limits them to be able to participate in the conversation. I think that using a external, and of course, I will put my hand up in full disclosure, I am, a contracted board secretary, but I think that using a contracted board secretary means that there's no going to be any conversations leaked outside the boardroom from anybody who works within the organisation. There's not going to be anybody in the organisation that thinks that person knows more about the organisation and what's going on. And it can really help with company politics to have somebody else whose sole purpose is independently recording the minutes of the meeting. Danica?
Yeah, totally agree with that, Jen. It's I think that having someone independent is very important because they can listen and they can concentrate on the conversation and they can summarize what's happening versus someone who's actively participating who will come away with their own interpretation of that conversation. Like, it's very, very hard not to do that if you're actively involved in having that discussion. So it just eliminates any kind of bias in those minutes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got instances where chairs are taking minutes or the CEO. I can see.
Oh, no.
It's a big no, because the board minutes belong to the board. They are the responsibility of the board, and the directors have that responsibility to ensure those minutes are correct. And when the CEO takes the minutes, there's an opportunity for the CEO to direct the board in the way that that suits them. So just, if you've got your CEO or your CEO's PA, what have you, taking your minutes, just really have a good think about who's responsible for those minutes and the best way to get the most independent outcomes.
Now we have one of our attendees with their hands up. Jean-Claude Legrand, would you like to say something?
You'll need to unmute yourself. Or Sean, you'll need to unmute him.
Let's have a look. He is unmuted.
Oh, I can see a little red microphone symbol there.
No, it won't let me change it. Okay, I'll fix that. Let's move on.
Sure. So now what should be in the minutes? So back in the day, there's been several different iterations of how the minutes should be taken. Used to be a transcript, he said, she said. Then we moved away from that and we went really, really light and we just recorded the decisions. Now what we want is a really clear representation of what the conversations leading up to the decision, not the conversations about the weekend and management decisions. Really, really key about keeping operational stuff outside of the governance minutes. And as with a professional board secretary, you can easily manage that by simply saying, so from a governance perspective, I'd really like, and hey, we're getting into the weeds here, can we bring this back to a governance level? I think that, again, with that confidence, you do need to be able to make sure that what you are recording is a true and accurate record of those minutes. So don't be afraid, board secretaries, to speak up and say, can I just confirm that I have that decision right? Can I confirm that this is the intention of the minute? And make sure that you actually get the support that you need from the board chair and from the rest of the board to make sure that the minutes are right.
Yeah, and after you've done the minutes, they should be probably sent to the chair for their initial review. So you also have that opportunity for them to clarify anything that you were unsure of. They can kind of give you corrections on what resolutions and approvals and actions should be at that point too.
Yeah.
Jen, sorry to interrupt. Fiona's asking, our chair signs the minutes. Can this be done in Board Pro so we don't have to print it out?
Very soon.
Very soon. Yes, it can.
At the moment, though, what do they do?
At the moment, I mean, again, it's that security, it really gives me the nerves about printing out your document, having them sign it and then scanning it back in. As long as you're making sure that that document's either being securely stored or securely destructed after that signature and scanned into the system, then that's what you may need to do. And if it's the practice of your business to do that, then just go ahead and continue to do that, and then jump in full force once the signatories option comes on board. So just to complete the slide, who should be, what should be in the minutes? Titles, not names. I've said that before. So, when John comes in to present his operational report, we don't put John came in to do that at this particular time. What we do say is the operations manager presented his report, or the CEO, or the chair. So I try not to refer to people by name. And as Danica said earlier in the meeting, it's really important to record when people come and go from the meeting, because that's where their responsibility starts and stops. Even though the board is a natural person, and if a decision is made when you're not present, then you are still responsible for that. However, you can sort of claw back a little bit of culpability if you weren't present for that decision.
And we do say who was at the meeting. So if John came in, we state that he was the operations manager during the actual minute conversation itself. But at the top of the minutes, we will have that John, the operations manager, was present at the meetings between either this time and this time, or for items XYZ. So we do need a record of who was there, not just their title, but absolutely what Jen's saying in the minutes themselves. We don't need to be referring to people by name.
So I guess the other thing is what should not be included in the minutes. Minutes can get quite wordy, and I'm really down for making sure that the minutes are a succinct, true and accurate record of the meeting. So if it doesn't involve the decision and it doesn't involve governance, if it's not going to show the company's culture, if it's, I guess this is getting a little bit too deep, but we always try to consider what the exit strategy of the business is. So, for example, if the company is looking to be acquired or merged, or if it's going to be sold, you certainly want to use that lens when you're creating the minutes. So what should not be in the minutes are, the language that you use should be positive, it should be respectful, and it should be complete. We don't want we want not wishy-washy stuff. The board thought about, the board talked, the board decided, the board discussed, so make sure that your language is really professional when you create your minutes.
Yeah, and I just want to add there as well, you don't need to repeat information that's in the board paper itself. It can be very easy to do as a minute taker, because often the executive will come in and they'll read out the key points that they want to highlight from their report, and it can be very repetitive from what's actually in the report itself. Minutes are always read in tandem with the board pack, so you don't need to repeat that information. Auditors or potential acquirers or courts will always look at both the board pack and the minutes in tandem. So you really don't need that repetition. It just fills up space. What you really want to be putting in is just what the board discussed in regards to that.
Excellent tip, Danica. Dead right. So lenses lenses. Sean, can we go back to lenses?
You can.
Awesome. So that's a little bit of what we were discussing right now, right? On what lens are we looking at the minutes through in terms of what we're looking at? We're looking at through the lenses of, is it compliant? Are the minutes compliant with legislation? Have we recorded the minutes accurately? Have we recorded the decisions accurately? Have we got the right quorum? Have we got the right quorum for decision making? Are the decisions actually a special decision or special resolution? Are we confusing directors' decisions with shareholders' decisions? We need to make sure that they are legally accurate, and we need to view from that lens. Oh, I've just got that question there's popped up. Who should be entitled to edit the minutes following the meeting? if I had my way, no one other than me as the board secretary. But yeah, certainly the chair should be able to edit the minutes and the board secretary. But I highly discourage anybody else from being able to edit those minutes. Although Board Pro does.
Board members can make suggestions to be considered by the chair and the board secretary for edits. Management can make suggestions, but the only people physically editing the minutes should be the board secretary. And sometimes the chair, but the chair should probably still go through the board secretary for any changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, so those different lenses are, really important to look at. Again, what's the exit strategy of the business? Do the minutes reflect that? If a possible acquirer is going to read these minutes, are they going to see the information that's going to support the merger and acquisition document that they've received, the company information, etc. So it's, there's several different lenses that, that they need to look through. Danica, have you got any comments on that?
No, I think you're right. Just in terms of what's the summation, you don't want too much information. It needs to tell a true and accurate record of what was discussed at the meeting, and it needs to have those key details in terms of when the meeting was, where it was, what time it was held, who was there, what time it finished, and the venue.
Sure.
Now keep your questions coming, everybody, because as I said in the beginning, if we don't have time to answer them here, we'll answer them live on our live stream tomorrow on LinkedIn. So, yeah, keep them coming.
So how long should the minutes be? The board is, one natural person and should show real cohesion. So we don't need to discuss, as Danica has given you that fantastic tip, don't need to put information that's already in the board pack or in the reports. And some of those SLT members do have a tendency just to read their report as they come in. We try to discourage that, but they often do. So a simple statement: the board received the report. I personally don't like the report was received as read. I don't like that wording, but that's just my personal preference. And I like to make sure that when I look at the minutes, I look at that lens, has enough been said that somebody who wasn't at that meeting can actually get a good indication of how decisions were made and what information was received by the board to support their ability to make decisions on behalf of the company. Danica, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think just you've put that second point there, the extent to which matters are documented should be proportional to their substance or materiality. What we mean by that is, you might, as a board, have a 45-minute conversation about the brand of coffee that you have in the staff room. Actual example. That doesn't need to go in the minutes. You might put what was decided, as in the board discussed and decided that it was important to have XYZ brand of coffee. You don't need to say blah, 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 and summarize the entire conversation there, because that's not important governance. What is important is things relating to solvency, to reckless trading, to reviewing the finances, to HR matters, to health and safety matters. These things that the board actually has responsibility for, those are the things that have substance and need to be recorded with a little bit more detail.
Just on that, Danica, I am really careful about recording, and I'm sure you are too, recording HR matters. There is such an incredible process around HR that one, you never mention a person's name if there's an issue, an HR issue in the minutes. And less is more when it comes to recording HR matters. Something along the lines of the board discussed the health, safety and wellbeing of all staff, or the board discussed reviewed and discussed the employment agreement template, or the policies relating to health and safety, or the policies relating to employment, the policies relating to dispute resolution, etc. Yeah, the board minutes are a legal document. They record everything, they are discoverable. So please just be really careful when you're recording HR matters, that there's nothing going to be recorded that could potentially put the directors in harm's way, because your job as a board secretary is to protect the directors and protect the company and make sure that they are compliant in everything that they need to do. But HR matters are quite sensitive.
Yeah. When you're talking about identifiable data in terms of people, staff, or customers, that should probably be in directors only time, and it shouldn't be documented.
Not minuted. That's right. I mean, the directors do have a direct responsibility for the health, safety, and well-being of everybody who works in the organisation. So when a matter is brought to them, and even if it is an HR matter, they do actually need to have some protection that they are acting on that matter, and that they are that they know about the matter, that, you know, and particularly if it's in a board paper. Like if it's in a board paper, then the minutes need to reflect that they have actually discussed and are being proactive in resolving any issues that there might be. So just be aware of that. As Danica said, the board pack is read in conjunction with the minutes. So if you are a board secretary that has complete ownership from end to end, always be aware that when board papers come up from senior leadership, that if they do discuss those matters, that you're really careful about what does actually even enter your board pack. Right. I did see that there was a question that popped up, you know, what do you do when a chairman wants you to record every single conversation? My very short answer to that is there's a really wonderful masterclass, I think, from Board Pro, or at least a webinar from Board Pro about how to chair a meeting. I suggest they go and review that.
There is a masterclass on that very topic coming shortly.
Exactly. So highly recommend that they go to that as part of their continuing professional development.
Diana's asking, when is the signing option going to be available on Board Pro? I believe it is next month. The end of September is when it's going to roll out. So we are all waiting with bated breath.
I think for preparing and finalising the minutes, we've really talked a lot about that. But the process should be that once the meeting's finished, I'm sure that you have similar sort of timeframes, Danica. I like to get a copy of the draft minutes to the chair of the meeting within 48 hours, usually within 24, but within 48 hours. And that means that the chair can actually review it while it's still fresh in their head as well.
Yeah, I think it's acceptable for up to 5 days after the meeting. I know some people that are doing minutes as part of their job, and they're not necessarily a dedicated board secretary, might not have the time to be able to turn them around in 24 to 48 hours. But the general expectation from chairs and boards is kind of within 5 working days. Yeah. And then the chair should kind of do an initial review, and then that should be sent out to the rest of the board or the rest of the committee for their review while it's still fresh of mind.
Yeah, I like to get my minutes out to the whole board, get them distributed within 5 to 7 days. So, you know, I have a pretty rigorous regime in terms of, you know, managing the chairs to make sure that they do put the time aside. I also, you know, as a little bonus that's not related to the minutes, is I do actually set board dates a year in advance, so that can go into everybody's calendar. And then I tee up those meetings with my chair to have the conversation once the draft meetings are set. Also tee up a conversation with my chair prior to the meeting to make sure that the agenda and everything's sorted. So if you get those things in the diary and you let your expectations be known, then that whole process can work so much faster. So top tips. I'm just going to hand some of these out because I think that that you guys will find them interesting. So my top tips for writing minutes are Grammarly. If you don't have Grammarly installed, it's a wonderful tool. And make sure that you are putting in the roles and not names and titles. Communicate to the chair what your preference or your style is, and the modern way of you know, not moving and seconding. Get the chair on board, because realistically it's their board, and so you need to be directed by the chair. But if you create that fantastic relationship with them, then they pretty much give you free rein, which is wonderful, because it means that they everything happens and they're not responsible for chasing anybody or doing all those other things. They can just leave you to own the role. Check regularly that the minutes are meeting expectations with your chair. Are you happy with these? Are they getting too wordy? Have I put in enough detail? Are you really happy with them? Is there any changes that you think that I should make? So those are the conversations that you need to have with your chair. When you are trying to get from a lengthy, very discussive board meeting, here are a few phrases that you can use that I find really helpful. So in summary, and you just let them talk. So from a governance perspective, how would you like that recorded in the minutes? So for the minutes, if you could just give me a summary, that would be great. And what you really need to do is read the minutes through all of the lenses: protection for directors, the historical recording of where the company's at, and if a new person was to come in, the minutes should stand alone and they should be able to gather their information from that meeting. And the last lens is, does it contribute to the strategy and the decisions made fit in with the strategic intent, the goals, mission, and vision of the board? All of those things should be really cohesive to present a professional view of the company. And then lastly, does it need to be there? You read something, you think, actually, that doesn't need to be there. Just take it out. Less is more. Danica, any top tips from you?
Just if you can, having board software to help you with that just creates so many efficiencies. This is not actually a sales pitch for Board Pro, but just the minute function within Board Pro and in some of the other board software that I've used makes life so much easier when you can automate those decisions registers, those actions, when the minutes are going to be confirmed. It'll auto-populate a lot of the minutes for you. It makes life so much easier as a minute taker.
Absolutely. I tautoko that 100%, Danica. It's I use 3 other board softwares at the direction of my boards, and by far the one I prefer is Board Pro, and it's the one that I recommend. And I'm not paid by Board Pro. I'm not a member of, I'm not a member of their sales team or anything like that. But as a professional board secretary, I regularly review the products that are available to us. I'm sure you do as well, Danica. And so far, I haven't managed to find one that measures up with the value for money for Board Pro, and also the level of automation and the efficiency that it brings to my role is incredible. Then no other product actually thinks about the board secretary as much as what Board Pro does, I believe.
Wonderful plugs, unashamedly. Very nice. Hey, so please feel free to connect with Jen and Danica via LinkedIn if you'd like to be put in touch with them after the webinar, and even hire them for their services, which I would highly recommend you do. Just indicate on the survey at the end of the webinar as you are moving out. So we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. It's going to be a really interesting hands-on webinar, this one, how to work practically with AI in the boardroom. This will not be a presentation. There won't be one slide. It'll be hands-on tools for board members, directors, CEOs, how they can work with AI tools to better their jobs inside that world. So that's going to be led by a guy by the name of Julian Moore, and he is one of the top AI practitioners in Australasia.
Wow.
So I'm looking forward to that. We also have a masterclass which sold out last week, so we're running it again. So this is a masterclass on how to write better board papers and evaluate your influence and impact. They are on November 20th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Please look through and familiarize yourself with the content there. I'm sure you will get a lot of value from that. So you'll receive an email from us really shortly, which will give you a video of today's webinar, the presentation slides, the topic white paper, and of course the all-important minutes template. So as I mentioned to you before, we do have a special offer. Just before you leave the webinar, don't forget to complete our quick 1-minute survey, and you'll go into the draw to win our $400 hamper. So I think I have got through everything. Let me just move my tiles down here. Yeah, oh, just as a reminder, just due to the number of questions we had, I think we had 24 left over. We are holding a live stream tomorrow on LinkedIn at 10:30, where Jen and Danica will just take us through and answer as many of those questions as we can. So thanks again for attending our webinar today, everybody. Thanks, Jen and Danica, for your contribution. Great as always. Have a great day, everybody.